Hello, everybody. This is Randy Ray at The Literate Texan, and this is the 200th video I've made for BookTube. Yay! That's over the course of 2 years. I hit my 2-year anniversary last week, so that's an average of 2 videos a week. I would like to be more productive than that, but I had some health problems, especially last year, which hopefully are on the mend. But I thought I'd do something a little different with this video since it's my 200th video. And I'm calling this video Getting Hydrated with Randy Ray. And this is something to drink. It's just water. You know, it's got a little Kool-Aid in it, but just Kool-Aid. There's no vodka or anything like that. I quit drinking 11 years ago. Quit drinking whiskey 11 years ago. Anyway, yeah, part of my health problems have to do with staying hydrated. And so, you know, you may have seen some of my videos before. You may not have. But if you have, you'll notice that I end every video with the sage advice of staying hydrated. And it really is so important for your health to stay hydrated. 70% of your body is made up of water. And just being a little bit dehydrated can have major effects on your productivity, your mood. So yeah, you should always have some water nearby. If you start to feel thirsty, it's too late. So I want to ask you, if you want to, grab yourself a glass of water. Commit to drinking that whole glass of water for this video. And I'm doing a question and answer video for this one, but it's a little bit different than my usual question and answer videos because there are questions from just one viewer. The other night, I had a really enthusiastic commenter come in and leave about 10 questions in one comment. And so I decided, I'm going to lean back and relax a little bit because I may be talking for a little while. But I decided that it would be fun to answer all 10 of these questions in one video. And so here I am, answering these 10 questions. So I don't know how comfortable I'm going to be able to get. I might have to sit back up in a minute. So anyway, you have Paladin Sorcerer 67 to thank for these questions. And you have me to thank for the answers to these questions. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this video. Stick around to the end and I'll have some news for you too about the channel. So question number one that Paladin Sorcerer 67 asked me, and one of the reasons I wanted to answer all these questions was because these questions are like tailor-made for me. It's almost like Paladin Sorcerer 67 actually knows me. I don't have any knowledge of that, but they may. What is your favorite place in Texas? Well, you know, I live in Texas, and I've lived in Texas all my life. I moved here when I was 3 days old. I was adopted. I was actually born in Omaha, Nebraska. And my mother, my birth mother, I never really called mom or anything like that. I've met her, but she was an alcoholic and a drug addict and was not up to raising kids, but she sure was up to having a lot of kids. And I don't know, there's probably 11 or 12 of us out there. I was raised with a brother and a sister by an aunt and uncle here in Texas, who I call mom and dad. They're the ones who raised me. They're both gone now, unfortunately. But I was raised by them in Bonham, Texas, home of the world-famous Fighting Purple Warriors. I live now in Denton, Texas, which is the home of UNT and the Mean Green Fighting Eagles. And I guess Denton, Texas, I mean, it depends on how narrow you want to get with favorite place. Denton, Texas is definitely a place, but it's a big place. I have favorite places within Denton, Texas. One of them is my reading room, which doubles as a living room and sleeping area. I've got kind of like a little efficiency apartment built into my little 3-bedroom house here, which I share with a couple of roommates. But in terms of my favorite place here in Denton, Texas, golly, I was just about to say what it was. Now, oh yeah, I mean, it's obvious. Recycled Books and Records. Greatest bookstore I've ever known. One of the major reasons I moved to this town in the first place. I used to own a bookstore, of course, and I've talked about that a little bit before on the channel, and it was a favorite place of mine. There were a couple of bars that I used to hang out at that were favorite places of mine, but like I said, I quit drinking whiskey about 11 years ago. And but yeah, in terms of my current set of favorite places, Recycled Books and Records, which I've unfortunately been too sick to actually visit for a couple of years now. So I'm looking forward to getting healthy enough and well enough to be able to visit there again. And Anyway, I was just about to say something else, but I remember now. I'm saving that for the end of the video. Stick around to the end of the video because I've got a couple of announcements that I don't want to spoil, okay? But that's question number one. What's your favorite place in Texas? My favorite place in Texas is Recycled Books and Records right here in Denton, Texas. And my second favorite place is wherever I happen to be reading a book in Denton, Texas. Question number two. Besides your home, where is your favorite place to read? You know, I don't do a lot of reading outside of my home, although last year I spent so much time in the hospital that I did a lot of reading in the hospital. I wouldn't call that one of my favorite places to read, though. When I was younger, believe it or not, I was a little bit of the outdoorsy type, and I used to like to go camping, especially up in Oklahoma. And me and some pals of mine used to go up there to Lake Murray and Turner Falls. Those were the two places we most liked to go camping. And when I was younger than that, still we would camp out at Lake Bonham or at the state park there. But I spent a lot of time, and sometimes renting cabins, whatever, in Lake Murray and in Oklahoma, and then at Turner Falls. But I would always try to start the camping trip a little bit earlier than my pals to give me a chance to do some reading while I was there. And I can remember some great, glorious reads because when you're camping by yourself, you don't really have to talk to anybody else. You've got all the time in the world to read. And so I can remember reading Travels with Charlie from cover to cover all by myself, sitting in a lawn chair outside of my tent, camping out at Turner Falls. Wonderful book. If you've never read Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck, you should give it a look. Also, I read Walden cover to cover out there. There's a book by Edward Abbey called The Fool's Progress, and I read it cover to cover at a campsite out at Lake Murray. But I'm usually able to finish a book in a day out camping before the other people get there. So yeah, my favorite place to read outside of my home is anywhere outside. I like to sit outside and read. Nowadays, if the weather's nice, I'll sit and read out on my back porch here. I've got a nice little deck out back, which I use for a couple of things. On Sundays, I like to sit outside and listen to Frank Sinatra from the 50s. His albums from the late 50s, early 60s are just sublime. But I'll do that. I'll also play guitar out there on the deck occasionally, and then I'll read books out there on the deck. So, but only when the weather's pretty. If the weather's hot, I don't sit out there anymore. I'm not up to sitting around just sweating anymore. Question number three. Do you prefer to buy books or check them out at the library? Okay, so now that I'm an adult with a disposable income, I like to buy books. Keeping up with when books are due at the library and taking them back is just something I'm not really good at. I'm not really much good at anything that requires you to be responsible. Gonna hydrate. And the library is one of those things. But when I was a boy, one of the biggest coming of age rituals of my life was getting my own library card. And I didn't start going to the library when I was 12. That was the age at which you could get your own library card at the Bonham Public Library. But I used my dad's library card. I had to use my dad's library card because that's the only way you could do it. But my parents started, my mom was a big reader. Daddy, not so much. But my mom was a big reader, and they encouraged my reading habits. And they had a lot of books at home. My mom didn't really know better, so she had a bunch of classic literature. But it was all in those Reader's Digest abridged versions. And so I'd read a lot of those, but I didn't really get the full effect of them because I was reading them young, and you never know who's doing the editing or the abridgments on those. You never know how good or bad they're going to be. So, I can't say much for Reader's Digest condensed versions of those books. I don't think they do those anymore. But I could always find cool stuff at the library to read. And, they had a nice little science fiction section there, a little fantasy section. I remember they had all the James Bond books that had ever been written by Ian Fleming at the time. I remember just inhaling those down at the public library. Of course, I read all the kids' books too. We had the complete sets at home of the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, which was junk, but I would inhale anything at that age. I didn't have a lot of guidance in terms of what I should be reading. In fact, I didn't start getting a lot of guidance on what I should be reading until I got to college. I don't feel like, the Bonham public school system was fine. I came out of it with a fine education. But in terms of an English major with a background in literature, I was way behind compared to a lot of the other students who were freshmen at the University of North Texas. Of course, it didn't help that I was in the honors program, and they only allowed 50 students into the honors program each year. I don't know what the deal is with the honors program now, but I went from being a big fish in a small pond when it came to reading literature and being smart when I lived in Bonham, Texas, which wasn't as much of an advantage as you think, because in Bonham, Texas, they're all about football. They're all about supporting the team on Friday night, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But kids like me who like to read books, we generally got more picked on than anything else. So yeah, I was a nerdy kid of the '80s, but it's okay. I turned out all right in spite of it. And when I got to college and I got some reading mentors and stuff, I did change my reading taste quite a bit, and it was a good experience. And I'll talk more about that later. So yeah, now I just prefer to buy books though. I buy books, I resell them up at Recycle Books and Records. They're still circulating in and out of my house. If it's a book I really love and think I'm going to read more than once, I prefer to have it on my shelf. I like to give books away too. I've got daughters who are readers and I like to give them books. I've got friends that I try to encourage to read and I give them books too. So question number 4 from Paladin Sorcerer 67. I love that screen name. Have you read any books written by philosophers? Plato, Hume, Descartes, Russell, etc. I took 3 philosophy classes when I was in college, and mostly we read excerpts from books there. I don't know that I've read an entire book of philosophy by a philosopher. I don't know if Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pearson counts. It's a great book, but I don't know if you count that as a work of philosophy or if the author is a philosopher or not. One of my philosophy professors was Dr. John Kimmy, and he was terrific. I don't know if he wrote any books or not, but if he did, I didn't read any of them. My other philosophy professor when I was in college was Max Ohlschlager. And Dr. Ohlschlager had written a book called The Idea of Wilderness, which was nominated for a Pulitzer. And I did read it, and it's absolutely terrific. And he was a mentor professor of mine when I was young and while he was writing the book. And I can still remember how excited he was to get his first laser printer and to be able to print off the pages from the book that he was writing and show me his revision process and stuff. It was just such a great time to be getting an education because computers were on the rise. I went to college from 1988 to 1993. So yeah, I've read one book by a philosopher, and that was The Idea of Wilderness by Max Ohlschlager. I mean, other than, does Walden count by Henry David Thoreau? I think it should, but maybe it doesn't. I haven't read Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson, but I think that's an essay rather than a book anyway. I don't know. Philosophy, never my thing. Number 5, have you read anything by H.P. Lovecraft? Not only have I read anything by H.P. Lovecraft, I've read everything by H.P. Lovecraft, which isn't that much, really. It's only 4 volumes. And that's including the stuff that he did as rewrites for other people. But, you might have heard me mention multiple times on here that I used to own a bookstore. I did used to own a bookstore. What I don't always mention is that bookstore specialized in horror books. The name of the bookstore was Eerie Books. And so, of course, I kept H.P. Lovecraft in stock in any edition that I could get a hold of, especially collectible editions. And of course, I'd read them all. I was introduced to H.P. Lovecraft, like a lot of people probably of my generation, by a tabletop role-playing game called Call of Cthulhu, which I will talk more about in future questions. Maybe be the next question. I don't know. Let's find out. Number 6, have you ever played, it is this one, any tabletop RPGs? And it says Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, etc. So, yes, not only was I a book nerd growing up, but I was also an RPG nerd. I played Dungeons and Dragons back when they thought it was witchcraft and thought if you were playing D&D, you were a Satanist. And it was kind of a big deal, and it just seemed as silly now as it did then. I mean, of course, we're not practicing witchcraft. But I can remember, I was obsessed with The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit as a young man. I read The Lord of the Rings 6 times before the 6th grade. It was really seminal reading in my career as a reader. And I remember going to Walmart and seeing this game on the shelves there. It was the D&D box set. And I just had to have it. Because why would you not want to play a game where you got to be an adventurer or a wizard or a fighter, like like one of the characters in the Lord of the Rings. That was immediately when I saw the cover on that box, I was like, I know what this game is all about, and I want in on it. And that had been my only exposure to fantasy, other than fairy tales like Grimm's Fairy Tales and stuff. Until then, was the works of J.R.R. Tolkien and Dungeons and Dragons. And I played Dungeons and Dragons for a good little while with family members, but it wasn't long before I branched out. There was a bookstore in my hometown called Cardwell's Books and Hobbies, and I popped in there one day and noticed a sign on the wall that said that they played RuneQuest every Saturday. RuneQuest at the time was the main, maybe even the only competition that Dungeons and Dragons had when it came to fantasy role-playing games. And unlike Dungeons and Dragons, which did not come with a default setting, RuneQuest came with the default setting of Glorantha, which was the creation of Greg Stafford. And it was a wonderful game, and it was a really rich background. And I remember creating my first character. She was a barbarian who was also a unicorn rider. And she was basically the party's healer. Because between the unicorn being able to provide healing and her being able to provide healing, that was just the function we performed in the party. And I can still remember my first adventure in RuneQuest 2. It was a big, experienced party that was tackling a dungeon crawl at the time called Snakepipe Hollow. And even the monsters in RuneQuest were unique and interesting. You know, D&D fought goblins and orcs and bandits or whatever. But in RuneQuest, we were encountering things like Scorpion Men. Scorpion Man's like a centaur, but instead of having the hindquarters of a horse and the body of a human in the front, you got the hindquarters of a scorpion. That's scary just to think about, because hell, even a small scorpion sting is bad. Can you imagine fighting a scorpion the size of a human being? You know, there were Scorpion Men. There were Brews, which were humans with the head of a goat who spread disease. Yeah, RuneQuest, that experience playing RuneQuest at the bookstore was one of the greatest role-playing game experiences of my life. It did not take long for my interest in RuneQuest to branch out into an interest in Call of Cthulhu, which is a tabletop role-playing game based on the fiction of H.P. Lovecraft. And Call of Cthulhu was completely different from RuneQuest or Dungeons and Dragons, either one, because in Dungeons and Dragons and in RuneQuest, your goal is to acquire power. The more you learn, the better you get at skills, the more powerful you become, and eventually you make your mark on the world. But in Call of Cthulhu, as in the stories of H.P. Lovecraft, the universe is full of really awful things that are far bigger than you can ever imagine. And the more you learn about how big and strange the universe really is, the more your sanity goes down. And eventually you go insane. Also, you know, to learn a magic spell in Call of Cthulhu permanently affects your sanity. So you cannot become a powerful wizard in the game Call of Cthulhu without eventually going insane. Also, yeah, so, you know, you just literally cannot become powerful in the game Call of Cthulhu. That's not what the game is about. The game is about facing hopeless odds in spite of the fact that they're hopeless and buying ourselves a little bit more time. Because at the end of the day, the humans aren't going to win. It's the great old ones that are going to win. That's just how it is. So, an interesting little bit of trivia too. The game, The Call of Cthulhu, which is how I got introduced to the fiction of H.P. Lovecraft, was written by a young game designer at the time named Sandy Peterson, who has his own game company now called Peterson Games. But he lives here in Texas, as it turns out. And years ago, when my children were really small, Sandy was still hosting a RuneQuest night at his house. And I got invited to join that. And so Sandy and I are friends. We're not close friends, and I haven't talked with him in years. I should reconnect with him. But I mean, we were good enough friends that he came to the opening of my bookstore, which was really cool. And let me tell you, if you haven't played Call of Cthulhu with Sandy as the GM or RuneQuest with Sandy as the GM, you're really missing out. It was a really cool experience. So I was really happy about that. Number 7, do you play any of the modern board games that are available? Examples include Axis and Allies and Settlers of Catan. Yeah, I do. I own quite a few. The last modern board game that I played was Cosmic Encounter, which is actually a really old game, but it's gone through several editions. I like Cosmic Encounter because the rules change based on which alien race that you play. And it has that in common with a game called Dominion, where the rules change based on the cards that you play. Dominion's a really fun it's not a collectible card game, it's a deck building game. All the cards that you need are in the box or in the expansions. And those are two of my favorites. Cosmic Encounter and Dominion are two of my favorites. I've played Settlers of Catan. It's all right. I played Kids of Catan. I really enjoy Pandemic. That's a lot of fun. I haven't played the latest version of Arkham Horror yet, but I did play the version before that. We also really enjoyed Mansions of Madness. I like cooperative board games, but a lot of times they're really hard to win, has been my experience. Shadows of Camelot was a lot of fun. We used to play that pretty often several years ago too. But yeah, I play, I like modern board games because they don't require the commitment that a tabletop role-playing game does. I am GMing a tabletop role-playing game campaign right now, but I'm absent more often than not, which is too bad for my players. But we're engaged in a Pendragon campaign right now. Pendragon is a fantasy role-playing game where you play a knight in King Arthur's court, which is really cool because you basically only have the one character class. But your job is to make your knight into an interesting individual in spite of the fact that he's quote unquote just another knight. But the story has to count when you're all playing basically the same character class. Also, one of the things that I like about Pendragon is that each adventure covers a year in game time. So, if you play a campaign every week for 52 weeks, 52 years have passed in game time. So if your character started off as a knight at 20 years old, he's going to be 70 years old if he's survived all that time. So what do you do with the character when he gets old and he's too old to adventure? Well, he has sons and grandsons. So you don't just play a single knight. You eventually play 3 or 4 generations of knights. And in the campaign that I have going right now, we're doing the Great Pendragon campaign. And we're still in the part of the campaign where King Uther is the king, and he's trying to unite all of the kingdoms. But anyway, that's been a lot of fun. It's a great game. If you're looking for a tabletop role-playing game to play that's different from what you're used to, Pendragon is definitely one way to go. Number 8, did you have good experiences with your college courses in literature? I had good experiences with my college courses in literature with one exception. I had a bad experience with English Literature Part 2. The professor was terrible. There's just no way to get around it. And I'm not going to mention her name on this video because I don't see any reason to name and shame, but it was one of the worst experiences of my life educationally. Her grades were completely arbitrary. I never got a single bit of useful information out of any of her lectures. Everyone in the class absolutely hated her. Everybody in the class complained about her constantly, and everybody was justified in doing so. Other than that, I had a terrific experience being an English major at the University of North Texas. And I'm still friends with some of the professors from the program back then. I'm friends with some of the people who are professors in the program now, but that's another story too. So, and finally, this is the last question here. Has getting a degree in literature helped you to be a better worker in the working world than you otherwise would have been? Well, I'm not sure because I can't compare it because I've always had a degree in literature while I've been working. I like to think that having a degree in literature makes me a better person. I certainly think being well-read is going to help you be better at anything you put your mind to. And I would not be as well-read as I am had I not gotten the English degree. But I didn't go into teaching high school like you would think, like most English literature people do. There just was too much work in it and there wasn't enough money in it. So, I went into sales in corporate America, which luckily I got out of in the year 2006 when I started my own business doing consulting and working on the internet. And that's worked out well enough for me that I've been able to work for myself ever since. And so, those are just some random questions and answers for you to listen to while you drink some water and get hydrated to celebrate this being my 200th video. I hope it was interesting. One of my commenters the other day mentioned they liked it when I ramble and tell stories and digress and stuff. So that's basically all this video has been. But I do want to make a quick announcement. April is right around the corner. If you're part of the Lone Star Book Club, you probably already know that means we're going to be reading the Sonnets by William Shakespeare. I'm real excited about that. We're going to go really slow with the sonnets. I feel like poetry is something that should be savored. And these are just great. My friend Tom likes to say that the sonnets aren't really poems. They're a way for you to reboot your mind with a better operating system. Join in with us and see if you think that's the case too. And if you think you can't understand a sonnet, watch my latest Poetry Thursday video, Ozymandias. See if you don't understand that one. I bet you will. And I bet you'll be surprised at how easily you understand Shakespeare's sonnets, how much easier they are than you think they are. And if you've already experienced the sonnets, come join in on the discussions and enlighten us, because you probably know at least as much or more than I do when it comes to that sort of thing. So that's my announcement. Also, Spring into Adventure is right around the corner. I'll have an announcement video for that. And I've got another video where I'll be recommending a bunch of adventure books for you to choose from that you can get for free online. Believe it or not, there's so many options out there for adventure stories that you can see for free. But until you watch those videos from me, I just want to say thanks for watching. Thanks for being so kind to me for the 200 videos that I've made here. I hope that the next 200 videos go at least as well, if not better. And hey, stay hydrated, folks, and stay sexy. See you next time.